Welcome back to the shop. Today I'm going to be trying to fix up a plane that belongs to a family member. It was his father's, and it doesn't match the usual types that we find when we're dealing with collectible Stanleys, but this was very typical, most likely after 1970 and after all of the type studies in books like this that have the ways in it to figure out what year your plane was made. I wouldn't call this a collectible unless it was mint in the box and somebody was trying to show an example of something after 1970. So if you were to find this in a flea market or an antique shop or something like that, you might consider leaving it there. I don't consider it a very good plane, but we're still going to try to fix it up and see what we can do with it. The first thing we have to do is to get rid of the years of dirt and dust and sawdust and things that's in here, so we can see any qualities about it that are being hidden by that. Right here in the back, in front of the rear tote, it says made in England. I had no idea that it was made in England just until I brushed this stuff out. This plane lived most of its life in Syracuse, New York, which is upstate New York, and it came out of a home of a family member there, and it's interesting because there's different things about it that stand out. This blue color wasn't until until after about 1970. Now we got dust off of it. Let's open it up a little bit. The lever cap, a little stiff, is plated, and it's got a kidney shape, and there's no coloring in the name logo on the front of it. The other thing is it has a funny way that's different than most of the way that they attach the lever. So we'll have to take a closer look at that. Iron has been poorly sharpened. There's some rust on the frog here, and it's got a bent steel lateral adjuster rather than the older ones. And let's set this down. It's got a plastic front knob and a plastic tote, and you can see that the seam where they cast the plastic, there's a seam that runs all the way up it, very cheap, and the same thing on the front. Now the iron, interesting enough, was sharpened on the right side, but it's been put in reverse, so it could never cut properly because the bevel is on the top side of it. And if you look, here's the Stanley brand on the iron that wasn't obvious when I looked at the plane in the front because it was on the back. And here it says Stanley 012204 25-degree angle, which is typical that the English planes had that on there. So we need to get rid of this rust. We need to clean this up a little bit. We need to see how sharp it is, and we need to put it together properly. So let's take a look at some of these parts. I'm going to take this apart so we can look at it, and we'll do some close-ups. So here we go. Here's the frog. You can see the rust on it here that we need to take care of. And here's the iron. So it's interesting because there's rust all around here. This is loose, so I don't even need to worry about taking this out. But we want to take it all apart so we can see what areas have. This almost looks brand new, which is interesting. It also looks like it was chromed. So set that aside. There's some rust here that has to be dealt with, and some spottiness here. Let's take a look at the iron. the iron does have the part number for the plane, which is the, it looks like 012204, so I'll have to look that back up in the book. And it's got the grinding angle written on the iron up here. This needs to go away, this rust. We'll clean that up. And surprisingly enough, it looks like the bevel is good. It's dull, but it's not a messed up, it's perpendicular to the side. So I think this will be very easy to clean up. That's something nice about it. The frog we have to take out of here, and so we need a smaller screwdriver. That came out nicely. It's interesting that these screws here, or bolts actually, are so clean. Now I am finding no rust on this one, but I am finding some rust on this one. So we'll wire brush that off and clean that up as well. And now we can sweep out the trash that's on the inside here. And it's very easy to see, made in England. And this says CF1 here. And it looks like a heavy enamel paint on the sole or on the body. So let's take the handle off, or the tote, depending on what you'd like to call it. The nice thing is, everything is coming out very easy. Nothing seems to be frozen up. And it's still got the barrel nut type rather than the T-nut. Now, it also has an extra washer here, so there must have been a concern about that. But we'll take that out. We'll polish just the top, needs a little cleaning. But the tote is just gonna, little soap and water. And we'll see about this one here for the front knob. Very easy to take off. I mean, I've had some of these planes that are so bad because they're rusted in there. But there you go. Not bad shape either. And this will wash up nicely. So that's not a problem. Now we've got the bottom, or the sole, or the body of the plane pretty much ready to be flattened and get some of that rust off. Now let's take a look at the frog. The frog is the part that keeps your iron at the proper angle for cutting and sits there. So let's get, this is loose, very nice, easy to come out. Very good. Drilled all the way through. And on the older ones, this was brass, no longer. And we'll unscrew that. Now, because it's made in England, we don't necessarily know about, we can't really just assume that the way these things were made should match a certain type, because they may be manufacturing them a little differently in England than they did in the United States. So there's the end of the dust. This does not come off. I don't like, this part here is riveted. There's the back of the rivet, and it has rusted. So we're gonna put some Croil on that just to lubricate it up. We're gonna try to clean this up, but we're gonna be real careful not to wear out that rivet there. So that's the next thing to do. We've got all this apart. Now we'll go to cleaning. No soaking, no putting it in vinegar. We're going to just take off that rust real easily and resharpen the blade or hone it and see how that feels. Get rid of this rust here. This is not going to be that difficult a job. Let's go through the paces. So after a cold night in the shop, the wax that I applied to all the parts is nice and hard, and the first thing I needed to do was to take a microfiber rag and just buff the heck out of it, and just rubbing it. And in certain areas, I had to use a toothbrush to just clean the wax out and any missed dirt. But you can see the color is now a nice rich blue, and and nice and shiny. It's not here nor there as far as the working of the plane. There's still some minor staining here, but I'm not going to go too much into that. This is going to get another flattening. Once I get the handle and the whole thing together, I'll put it on the piece of granite and with some sandpaper. But it's very mild, this little worn part in front. But it's important to get that flat. It's not so important if you had other areas that had issues, but you really don't want to get that low spot in there. But it's looking good, and I think it's about ready to be put back together. So on these, your chip breaker and your iron, I waxed it also and cleaned it up. And again, there's a few little spots here where there's a little minor pitting, but it's not important because it's not on the back of the iron. And this is not a plane that I'm going to spend too much time on, although I'm doing it for a friend and family member. So, but it's you can see it's nice and sharp now, and it's ready to go back on. And I've set the chip breaker at just under a 1/16 from the edge there. But you can see it sharpened up nicely, and it was nice and perpendicular to the edge of the iron. So that's ready to go back. The plastic, rubberized, I don't know what it is. It's a hard plastic, probably similar to this old pen. But that just took a cleaning, soap and water, and then a little bit of wax on it afterwards, and I think it's fine and ready to go back on. The same thing with the front knob. The screws, I wire brushed them that hold the frog in, and you can see the wire brush took off the rust that was on these little areas here, and this is all very nice and clean and ready to go back on. So rather than do it out in the shop, we'll do it in here. And then this was on the buffing machine. I just simply spun that against the cotton cloth, and you can see that it's like new. And the same thing with this for the front knob. Both look very nice. All the dirt's gone, and those will go back on as they were before. The lever cap came up very nicely, and that was just using that buffing machine with some white wax. You can see it's still a little coarse in here, but I think that's not chipping as much as it is. That's just the poor quality of the work done on it originally. But see here, it's much better, and all of the crustiness of all of that is all gone, and it's ready to go back on. So let's put it back together, and I'll give you another shout back in just a few minutes. I think it looks good though so far. Oh, now here's an interesting thing about this one. Most of these irons had a flat piece of metal, so spring steel here, to sort of protect the iron when you close this lever. And this one doesn't have it. Not only does it not have it, but there's no hole here. As you see on a lot of them, this is where it attaches, is right down here. The area that is indented there looks like it should have taken one, but this one never had one because there's no evidence of any hole there. So
I kind of find that a little fascinating and odd. But you learn something new on every one of these, and you have to take that sort of thing in stride. But it does point out another thing for people to pay attention to when they see a plane in a flea market. If they see one that doesn't have that flat piece of spring steel and there is a hole, then something's missing. But without the hole, I don't believe this came from the factory any different than what we're seeing now. All right, I'll put it back together and get back to you. So I've got the iron in, and it looks like it came up pretty nice. If you sight down it, it's very even, so that's pretty good. Now what I need to do is I'm going to take the iron back out, and I'm going to do some flattening of this sole a little more polish to this, and try to get this tiny hollow. It's not a lot. You can see the discoloration there though, and that means that that has not been touched by the sanding that I gave it earlier. So I'm going to remove the iron, and I'll do it leaving the handle on, no iron, no cap, and go ahead and run it a few more times, and we'll see if we can't get that bottom a little cleaner. But overall, I think it's looking much better than before, and we're going to do a little test to make sure it works okay. This is a piece of maple, and you see I've got some cuts in it and everything, so it's just sort of a test piece that I've had. And let's see how it works. Put a little oil on the bottom of the plane, and see what kind of a shaving we get. Now, that's a pretty thin shaving, but what's the surface like? Surface feels pretty good. A few high and low spots on it, on the wood that needs to come out, but it's doing a nice job. Shavings are good, and that's nice and flat. So let's switch out the woods. So a little piece of pine. We'll see how it does on this. Now, I always find it interesting, depending on the wood, often enough you get a different thickness shaving. And so I'm going to back this iron back out some, just a little, and then we'll go back at it and see. Better, but still a heavy shaving. It's funny how that is on some woods. You get this sort of gossamer shaving. I backed it off some more. Now I'm getting a shaving that I like, which is a nice thin shaving. I use my planes mostly for finishing, sometimes for sizing, and then you take a deep cut. But overall, it's for doing a finished piece. And so I'm wanting to get a very fine shaving. This feels nice and smooth. The plane is working well. I'll give you a couple of opinions on it after we're finished with this. But there is nothing wrong with a shaving like that. So it's a good plane. So here we are, a fairly cheap plane. I suspect this was bought sometime around 1972 to 1979. It's been spotted in a catalog in 1979. And there were two versions of it. This one is the, let me get this number right this time, G12-204. This is, people call it a handyman, but I don't know that that's an accurate name that Stanley gave it. I don't see the name handyman in the catalog. But it was spotted in the 1979 catalog. This is the homeowner's version, and the other one was a handyman's version, but it's and it has probably that spring in there that this one doesn't have. Maybe some other qualities a little better. It does work, obviously, by the cuts that we're getting. This one was neglected, and it wasn't sharpened or taken care of. And now that it's got a good sharpening and the blade is on right, it's doing fine and giving a nice fine finish. I don't like this plastic knob or tote, and I find this distance very uncomfortable, even keeping a finger out. You can see this crowds this part of my hand, and I find that irritating. That's important to me if I'm doing a lot of planing. I don't mind the color, even though I'm more into that sort of black Japanning as far as a collector's concerned, but I'm just doing this for a family member and giving him his father's plane back in better shape than it was for him to hold on to and enjoy. And he's not a woodworker, but maybe every once in a while he'll be able to pull this out, do a quick job that he needs to, and remember his father. So that's what's important about this plane. But it does work. So if you find these and you're wondering, one, why are they so cheap or inexpensive? Or two, should I get it? In the beginning of the video, I said maybe you'd want to leave it there. But you know what? After using it, and if you don't have a lot, if you're not a collector, and you're not a fine woodworker, but you want one for around the house when you need one, this is perfectly acceptable. So anyway, I've enjoyed making this video and cleaning this up. I'm going to enjoy giving it to him tomorrow, and I hope he appreciates it, the plane that is. I'm not doing this so he'll appreciate me. He already does, so that's an added plus. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Maybe learned something. I know I did. I learned that G was not an O. I learned that this was made in England, and that maybe it's not a plane that I'd badmouth again, but I still think that these totes and knobs are nicer in wood. The plane has a good weight though, and so if you see one, maybe you just want to rescue it, or maybe you just want to use it. Thanks for coming to the shop, and I hope you'll share this video with your friends, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks again.